Good morning and welcome to the Maryland Realtors Free Thursday webinar series. Today, we have Scott Reid, the National Director of Cyber Insurance for Affinity Gallagher, with us to talk about cyber insurance and the cyber identity theft protection. You can ask questions in the question box, send them through, and we'll work them out and work them into the presentation throughout the presentation if we can, and if not, we will address the questions at the end. Thank you, and Scott, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Sounds good. Well, good morning, everyone. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to learn a little bit more about what's happening in the ever-increasing cyber and data breach world. What you're looking at on your screen right now is a real-time map. This is actually a recording, but there's a company called Norse that basically tracks and monitors the different types of cyber attacks that are happening at any given time. And as you can see from the map, there's a lot of activity coming out of China and Russia and Eastern Europe and our good friends over in North Korea. But what it does show is that about 80% of all of the cyber attacks that are happening on the worldwide front are actually happening against businesses located in the U.S. So it's a growing problem, and this company alone, and there's multiple ones that are out there, they track between 6 to 10 million cyber attacks against U.S. businesses every day. And so just given the sheer volume and number of attacks that are happening on U.S. businesses is probably why you're here attending today's webinar. It's virtually impossible to watch the news today without seeing some business across every industry and every sector that's had been a victim of a cyber attack. And I'm not going to spend too much time today going into a ton of scary statistics. I think by you just attending today, you realize that it is a problem, but what we want to focus a little bit of time on today is specifically how it's affecting small to mid-sized businesses and obviously those that are involved in the real estate industry. And a word that you probably hear a lot of called ransomware. There's 4,000 ransomware attacks a day reported to the FBI just in the real estate and financial services industry. So it's a real problem for your industry. But cyber is really a complex issue. There's just a lot of different things that are happening, and it means different things to different people. So what I am going to try to do this morning is quickly walk you through some very basics of what is really happening in the cyber and data breach world. Who are the people that are potentially coming after your businesses? Why this problem is not going to go away, and then specifically, why you should care as a real estate agent, how it can affect you. And then I do want to talk a little bit about a couple programs that are offered by your association, which will help you determine some of your risk, hopefully prevent some of your risks, and potentially insure it in case it does happen to you. As Christy mentioned, my name is Scott Reid. This is my email. If you have any questions that you'd like to send to me after today's webinar, it's just scott_reid@ajg.com. I am the National Cyber Risk Specialist for Gallagher Affinity, and what we do is we work exclusively with trade groups and associations to provide cyber risk products and cyber insurance to their members. I'm also the Executive Director of the American Cyber and Data Security Alliance, and we work with approximately 70 different trade groups and associations around the country, with our primary focus being providing, again, risk solutions to the small to medium-sized business market across multiple industries. But we do a lot of work with real estate professionals and other financial services industries. So in terms of what is going on, I'm sure everybody's heard about the latest, biggest hack, which was Equifax, and they've disclosed over 140 million people's personal information, including names and addresses and social security numbers. And the kind of scary thing is Equifax was one of the companies that a business would call post-breach to have them provide post-breach notification and credit monitoring services. So when the people that you hire to help you fix your breach gets breached, this just verifies again how big of a problem this is. And actually, it's affecting or has affected 95% of all the Fortune 500 companies. But specifically, the number one breached. Yes, ma'am.
I think, is there a phone in your upper left-hand corner where it says sharing under that orange button by chance? Because some people are saying they can't hear you. Is there like a phone signal that might be green or red?
There is a blue one.
Okay, now they can hear you. We're good to go. Sorry, I wanted to make sure they could hear you. They said I'm getting a message that said they can hear you now, so we're good to go.
Okay, sorry about that.
Sorry, no, you're good. Thank you.
You bet. So the number one most hacked industry, I guess, on the planet, unfortunately, is our federal government. And the reason I bring that up is there's kind of a misunderstanding in the marketplace that this is a problem that potentially the government will fix. But the reality is that 59 governmental entities have all suffered a data breach, including some pretty scary ones like the Office of Personnel Management, which was basically every single federal employee, including every federal judge, had their information disclosed. The CIA, the FBI, the Internal Revenue Service have all been breached. And in fact, the most recent one is the CIA was breached. And in their ultimate wisdom, they had placed all of the hacking code that they had been collecting around the world, and in some cases using themselves, in one place. It was called Vault 7. And Vault 7 was recently hacked earlier this year, and now the code that was used has been disclosed through WikiLeaks. So James Comey, who is former director of the FBI, went on record to basically say that now that these vulnerabilities in the cyber attacking code is now freely out there, that basically every business in America will need to take measures to protect their data and their systems. And the FBI director before him is well known for this statement, which is that there's only two types of companies in America right now: those that have been hacked and those that will, and those are converging basically into one industry or one category, which is everyone has been hacked and will be hacked again. So what's unfortunate about this, though, is this is basically the largest police force on the planet, basically saying there's not much they can really do to stop this stuff from happening. And I think the key that we want to try to express today is that this does happen across all industries and across all business sides. And in fact, the trend is really moving downstream in terms of the businesses that are being hacked, and again, specifically those in the real estate industry. 72% of breaches actually happen to those with less than 200 employees. The issue is you just don't hear about them like you hear about the big Equifaxes and the Sonys and the federal government breaches, but it is happening every day. And as I said, specifically, real estate agents and brokers are a target, and they're not just a target of the bad guys and the criminals and those looking for financial gain, but now it is becoming an industry that is going to become more and more regulated, both at the state level and at the federal level. And in fact, in Maryland, the Personal Information Act was just updated about 60 days ago, and it expanded the types of personal information that is considered to be confidential, that needs to be protected. And if it is disclosed, then you are obligated to notify the state, and you're obligated within 45 days to notify all of the affected individuals. And it's not just those that you know for a fact had their information disclosed, but it has anybody that had potentially been on those systems or in the databases that were compromised. And we'll talk a little bit more this morning about the difference between a data breach and a cyber breach, because those are two different types of transactions that could affect you. And the reason why this is so critical right now is data really is the new currency of today and tomorrow. Basically, every little piece of information that is maintained, and especially those, again, in your industry where you have financial information and banking account routing numbers and potentially, financial statements and net worth information of purchasers and buyers, and estimates and things that could potentially be confidential. Those are of value to someone. So when you get hacked or have that information disclosed, it typically ends up on what's called the dark net. And this is a real place. It is a dark and nasty part of the internet, and it is where basically anything can be bought and sold, and financial records and any kind of confidential information can be bought or sold in an anonymous fashion. And typically, they're looking to build information files. So it may be, from your perspective, like all I maintain is my client's name, addresses, phone numbers, email addresses. That actually now is protected personal information, and it is of value to someone that may be trying to build a bigger file. So you may not think it's high value, but they typically will be bought for pennies on the dollar, but they then take that information and combine it maybe with medical records that they stole from another breach. So every little piece of information is now protected and is of value. Let's just talk real quick about who potentially might be coming after your business. And again, this affects not just the big guys. These are the small businesses are being hit by these same people as well. There's all the nation state stuff that you hear about, again, the North Korea and the China and the Russians. The reality is those are probably not going to be targeting your business specifically. They're usually going after, things from a political perspective. But what all of these entities are looking for is a way to finance their efforts. So again, you may not think you're a target of North Korea, but they're not looking to target you for political purposes, but they're looking for ways to get money, just as other terrorist organizations. They may not be concerned about taking your network down or taking your business out of business, but they will for sure try to hold you ransom for a few $1,000s. And when they do that across thousands and thousands of businesses, it becomes a very financially rewarding for these organizations. But the number one issue right now is not the ones, again, that you hear about, the terrorists and the political states. It is basically organized crime, both on a U.S.-based structure, but also on foreign soil. That organized crime now makes more off of cyber and data breaches than they do off of any other criminal activity. And one of their key components is they like to put an insider person, in the organization, and that's where we're seeing a lot of activity right now. Is both on, again, foreign and national basis. Corporate espionage is a big one right now. You can hire, just as you can hire people on the internet to do pretty much anything, you can hire hackers, you can hire corporate espionage, basically spies that know how to break into people's systems and steal information. We're dealing with a client right now that just lost a really large commercial transaction on the real estate side. And they believe it was due to corporate espionage, where someone had broken into their systems, was monitoring the deal, and then basically someone else sold that information to a competitor, and they ended up closing the deal outside of the original group. And when the forensic people came in and looked at their systems, they noticed that someone had been basically in their systems for over a year, and they didn't steal anything. They were just basically monitoring deals, finding out, getting the inside track on things, and there's a multi-million-dollar settlement that's being worked on right now through these two agencies. I mentioned the insider person. It doesn't necessarily have to be that someone hacks into your systems, electronically. It could be an employee taking paper files. I'm also dealing with a claim right now, again, in the real estate industry, where an administrative assistant basically for a number of years was making photocopies of bank statements and other financial information and just taking them home at night. And over a period of time, she amassed a significant amount of data that she sold after she quit. And it took a long time to figure out where the data ultimately came from, but we ultimately traced it back to a disgruntled employee that had taken the information. And the good news is she was actually been caught. One of the few types of things that happen in the database world where we can actually trace it down to someone, and the authorities actually were able to get to her and did arrest her. But a lot of these things that are happening, again, on foreign soil and with organized crime, it's kind of a nameless, faceless crime, and it's really tough to track these people down. There's also hacktivists that typically are looking to potentially take your systems down to support their cause. Disgruntled employees, former clients and customers are all now kind of getting into the hacking and database game. And I mentioned criminals, even common street criminals now. The latest number I saw is that it's easier for them to make money in the financial crimes business than it is even in the illicit drug trade. So, there's no guns involved. There's no police chasing around. It's just basically computer to computer stuff or, stealing papers. And then there's always, you can't talk about anything in the cyber world without seeing this little picture of a guy in a hoodie. And he's typically just kind of the lone wolf hacker. And these are really hard to prevent and they're really hard to track down. This is just, one guy working on his own or, the young kid in his basement somewhere that's looking to have financial gain by breaking into your systems versus actually going out and getting a working job. So those guys are really hard to find and they're really hard to prevent. But even if you can dodge all of those, one of the most common places that happens in terms of data breaches in having information of your clients disclosed inadvertently is just human error. We're dealing with a situation right now where an administrative assistant sent out the wrong spreadsheet to the wrong person, and basically it contained financial information, all the employees' health insurance information, social security numbers, and that basically is a data breach that has to be responded to, and that was just good old-fashioned human error. Then you've got system glitches, computer networks break. Even if you outsource your cybersecurity to third-party vendors, their systems may not be foolproof. A lot of these big companies we just talked about, the Equifaxes in the federal government, they spent hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars on cybersecurity, yet they were still breached. So there is no system that is foolproof. And then the last one is just some very basic things in terms of data being disclosed inadvertently. Paper files left in coffee shops, briefcases lost, losing a cell phone and a computer technically is a data breach if on that cell phone or computer you have client data, emails of your customers, all those kind of things now are considered a data breach, and those are probably the most common. And in fact, according to an IBM study, almost 2/3 of businesses that had data breaches, it started within their own organization, either through employee error or lost information. So really, if you look at how data breaches and cyber attacks happen, it's really only about 50% of them are malicious or criminal. The other is between system problems and human error, and that's really kind of a training situation. And we'll talk a little bit about some of the tools that are available now through your association to help you train your employees and try to identify some of those risks to prevent it from happening. So let's look just quickly at what happens when you have a data breach. And again, a data breach and a cyber breach is kind of the same thing, but basically it's the unauthorized disclosure of any personal, identifiable, and non-public information to a third party. So it could be through your systems that get hacked, or again, it could be lost files. It's just something, inadvertently, the information that you as a business were charged to protect gets disclosed. And you as an industry and as a business do have what's called a duty to respond and a duty to protect. There is under corporate law that when you're transacting business, that they're basically trusting you with certain information, and you have to take steps to prevent that information being disclosed. And so when we kind of look further to the right about what happens, that's where the big exposure typically happens to you as a professional. Is if that information gets out, the lawyers and the regulators are going to be coming after you more probably than just an individual. The regulatory fines and penalties now are becoming pretty extensive, and the lawyers are really, really digging their teeth into these things right now. So when they find out about a data breach or a cyber event in your industry or in your neighborhood or against you, they typically will start to gather all of the people that were affected and will file a class action lawsuit. And majority of those we end up settling, but the cost to defend and the cost to settle is usually somewhere in the six figures per data breach. So once you have the breach, the first thing is you've got to kind of determine what happened. Was it something that happened internally, or was it an external situation? So there's cost involved that you have to bring in what's called forensic accounting people and forensic systems people, and they will dive into your systems and try to figure out what happened. And once that's determined, you have to spend money to fix the breach. And then there's the kind of short-term crisis, which is you've got to notify all the potential individuals, those that you know for a fact had their information compromised, but also anyone else that might have been on that system or say in that file, in that briefcase, whether or not they were financially harmed or not. You have to notify them that you had the breach. You have to provide them at least a year of credit monitoring. And then there's just the whole public relations side of things in terms of, losing trust with your customers. And it just becomes a public issue. So depending upon the size of the breach, you may have to hire, a PR team or someone from that perspective. Definitely, you're going to end up having some kind of reputational damage, potentially income loss from, lost deals. And then the lawsuits is where the big exposure ends up happening over a period of time. And in terms of those costs, if it is a criminal attack, it's about $170 per record is what it ends up costing you as a business to respond and defend yourself from any potential litigation from that attack. System glitches are usually a little less expensive, so they're easier to fix, and same with the human error. But either way, it's somewhere between $125 and I've seen some as high as $200 per record in terms of what it could potentially cost you. And here's why things, unfortunately, I think are only going to get worse. It's basically called the IoT of things, or the Internet of Things, and it's as a result of what's considered the number of touch points now that are happening in the internet space. So back 10 or 12 years ago, there were about 6.3 billion of us on the planet, and there were about 500 million devices connected to the internet. And if you fast forward to 2015. There was still just a little over 6.8 billion of us on the planet, and the number of devices connected to the internet, was about 2 per person, or 12.5 billion. And what they're projecting in the next 10-year period is there's going to be 8.1 billion of us, but there's going to be over 400 billion devices connected to the internet. And so when that happens, every single time there's an entry point into the net, that's a new potential security issue. I always get asked questions about, why would someone want to hack into my internet connected refrigerator or my thermostat at home? And the reality is they don't care about hacking into your refrigerator to see what you have in there from a food perspective, but your refrigerator and your Nest thermostat is connected to your home network, either through a router or Wi-Fi, or it might be connected through a cloud access. And that entry point, those devices typically have really, really, really lax security or simple passwords like 000. And so they hack in through those devices first, and then ultimately they end up getting to the juicy stuff, which is your home computer, or monitoring your Wi-Fi network when you're doing online banking or paying your credit card statement, or obviously in the business world, monitor your email traffic, or worse yet, break into your bank accounts or that of your client's bank accounts. And then aside from the Internet of Things, we're all so mobile these days that 75% of the workforce is mobile. They take their work stuff with them everywhere. And when they do that, they ultimately lose it or have it stolen. So lost cell phones, laptops, flash drives. Every 3 seconds, someone in America loses a cell phone. And 1 in 10 laptops will be lost or stolen before they're replaced. So every time that happens, that is a data breach under both state and federal regulations. So what can you do about it? Well, our approach, and the approach that your association is taking, is to provide you some tools to really determine what your risk is, and then give you some tools to help you stay in compliance and hopefully minimize that risk. And then lastly, we believe very strongly that you should carry cyber and data breach liability insurance. And so it's kind of a 3-step approach here, where the first is take an assessment. The second is take steps ongoing to try to protect your information. And third is assume the worst might happen and make sure that you have insurance in place, just like you potentially have insurance for other business risks in place. Is have a cyber insurance product in place, and all of these products are very competitively priced, and we believe very strongly that this approach should be taken, whether it's using the products and services that we make available through the association, or if you use this approach through other vendors. Either way, we feel strongly that it's just part of what you should do as a real estate professional. So first step is to assess your risk. I typically deal a lot with businesses that say, well, I outsource my IT, I have really good security, I have really strong firewalls, and that may be true, but they're probably getting that information from the vendor specifically that provides that to them. You know, that vendor is saying, yes, we do a great job. Yes, we've got all these protections in place. Well, having a third-party assessment basically comes in and just looks at what are you doing in your business now? What is management's position on this? What physical safeguards do you have in place? What does your vendor agreements look like? Do you have a plan in case your information is breached? And then you're given a report that basically gives you, it's like a scorecard. You know, you're scored between 1 and 100 on how well you're doing. And more importantly, you're also scoring your vendors to make sure that they're doing the things that you say they're going to do. And so that's a relatively low cost assessment. It takes about an hour to an hour and a half to do, and it's really great at identifying the risks. So through the association site, we can do a risk assessment for $495. And at the end of the report, you're also given a 1-hour consultation with a cyber risk expert that basically helps you read through your report and identify some of your weaknesses or areas that you're doing good in. And especially if you're doing good and you score well, keeping that assessment on file for the time that you potentially might have a breach. When the regulators come in or come in to do an audit, you can show, look, we were doing everything within our power to keep this information safe. We had an assessment done that gave us a 92% good score on this, and it's tough for the regulators to come in and say we're going to hit you with a fine or penalty when you actually were taking some of those steps to at least determine what your risk was. And then for those that don't score well on their assessment, we have a program called InfoSave. And again, these are other available in the marketplace, so that you don't have to necessarily use the one that we are talking about today. But there's others that are out there that basically will, once they're doing the assessment is done, then they will monitor your business on a move forward basis. So every month they come in and do stress testing on your networks. They look at your websites. They look at your social media. They'll provide you with ongoing training and security updates. They'll give you a certification report, both on a quarterly and annual basis, that basically says you are taking steps to prevent, your client data from getting exposed. So again, from a fine and penalty and regulatory perspective, it's really great to be able to show those reports at the time that an auditor comes in. And so far, we have not seen a significant fine against any business that has been able to show that they had both the risk assessment and ongoing compliance monitoring. So basically, again, it's a third-party validation about what you're doing with your systems is actually working. And then last but not least is cyber and data breach insurance. It is actually relatively inexpensive in comparison to some of the other insurances that you may need to buy. And if you buy cyber insurance, make sure you buy cyber insurance that covers both first-party liability and third-party. First-party is the things that you need to do in the event of a data breach right up front. So that's the notification to the affected individuals. It's the forensic investigations to figure out what happened. It covers business interruption. I'm going to walk through a couple examples where real estate agents, were unable to conduct business for a period of time because their systems were compromised. With the cyber insurance, they come in and pay for that lost income to business interruption insurance. And then once the crisis is kind of over up front, then you've got this back-end tail exposure, which is really the settlements cost to the affected individuals and any judgments that may be leaned against you, either from a lawsuit or, again, from a regulatory perspective. So depending upon the size of your business, the program that's available through the association starts at $199 for cyber insurance for up to $250,000 of protection. You can buy up to $5 million of protection, and it's really kind of based off of the size of your business. So a sole practitioner acting independently could get in for the $199 number. For a small brokerage agency, it's usually between $500 and $900 is kind of the cost of the cyber insurance. And in terms of looking at cyber insurance, like you may look at other types of insurance, I'm sure any of you that rent office space or have your own buildings, you have to provide general liability insurance to either the bank or to the leasing company. But the reality is 1 in 20 chance that you'll ever have to file a claim under your general liability insurance. Same for your professional liability insurance. Most of you would not conduct business as a real estate professional without carrying E&O insurance or professional liability that would cover you in case you're involved in some kind of litigation as a result of your work. But the reality there is you're only 1 in 8 chance over your entire career of ever having to file a claim under your E&O insurance. Same with basic stuff, auto, phone, fire, theft, property insurance. It's less than 10% you'll ever have to file a claim. But in the cyber breach world right now, it's between 40 and 60% chance that your business will have some type of data breach sometime during the business operations. So just highly encourage people to buy the cyber insurance as a backstop to protect you. I mentioned the products that are available, both the risk assessment and the ongoing compliance and the insurance. Just go to the Realtors website under member benefits. Click on it's 360 Coverage Pros is actually the platform that we use to make these programs available. All of the programs are online, so once you click through, you'll end up on this site right here. If you want the cyber insurance or the risk assessment report or the ongoing monitoring, you can do it online. You basically just answer a few questions, input your credit card, and the service or the insurance is effective the same day. So there's no insurance agent to call. There's no insurance agent that's going to come out and try to sell you other insurance. You can quickly have this in effect all online. But if you do have questions, we have an 800 number you can call, or we do online chat or email as well. So it's really easy to get these programs up and running. As I mentioned, that this is a live webinar, so if there's any questions anyone has, feel free to put them into the chat feature, and I'll try to answer them. Otherwise, when we finish up here in a few minutes, we'll run through any questions that you might have. But if you really look at some of the examples that I deal with on a day in, day out basis with claimants on their businesses being breached, we can always kind of trace things back to some very, very basic things that I wanted to share with you. First of it is shared or weak passwords. I know it's really hard for people to always change their passwords, and we're going to talk about a kind of a new structure that I would recommend you use for passwords that might help you. Having insecure computer servers, I'm still amazed at the number of small businesses that are running, all of their email and all of their client data on a server that's, in the back storage room or in somebody's office that doesn't have adequate security on it. Those are the ones that the hackers are love to find, and they're just really easy entry points. Also, the mobile devices, really, we trace a lot back to Wi-Fi. I don't trust Wi-Fi. I would encourage you to look at your security for your Wi-Fi networks, both on your home routers and within your business. Training of your employees, incorrect disposal of information. I'm going to walk through a couple of same claim examples where we traced the data breach back to someone basically just throwing files away in a garbage can that should have been shredded. So if you can look at some of these things, you can really reduce your risk exposure. In fact, I just mentioned that this is a real claim that we're dealing with right now from a real estate brokerage agency. They were basically moving a lot of their paper-based filing systems into an online environment and were scanning most all of the files, but they then didn't shred the files at the end. They basically had an intern that was putting it outside in a recycling bin, and they basically found about 80% of those files disappeared. And it was a big data breach. There was just a ton of information in those files that ultimately ended up on the dark web. We're covering about $100,000 in crisis management for them right now, and we're still in the final stages of the settlement, but the settlement's going to be somewhere north of $300,000. So this was an agency that had the cyber insurance in place. So basically, we covered all that, or the insurance carrier was responsible for that. Jury's still out on some regulatory fines and penalties that may happen at the state level, but we think at the end of the day, this one data breach, which again was not a cyber attack, it was just data that got inadvertently disclosed, it's going to end up costing about $500,000, and the insurance is going to pick all that up. Big one that I know in your industry that hopefully you're aware of is, cyber attackers love to break into the emails and then, the day before your closing transaction, change up the wiring instructions. And the only thing I can tell you there is just, always voice verify before a wire gets sent on a closing or any kind of financial transaction. Have a number of real estate agents that have gone back to paper-based transactions and closings at the bank themselves in person, as opposed to doing it virtually, especially when it gets to be the big numbers. We're dealing with a claim right now where this happened, the night before the closing. The email got sent that said, hey, there's been a change, send the wire here, and it was a $250,000 wire. We found it about 9 hours later, but by the time that it was found, it was actually a $350,000 wire. We were unable to recover $250,000 of it, so $100,000 was able to be clawed back. But once it got wired to one bank account, then it automatically got wired to multiple bank accounts all over the world, and it was impossible to get back. So for sure on this one, we're going to be $250,000 that the insurance policy is going to come in and pay for, but for sure there's going to be litigation on this one right now. So the people that lost the money are suing, the agent is suing the bank is suing the agent. So that's where, again, the insurance comes in that covers all that from a defense cost. Ransomware is by far the number one issue that we're dealing with right now, and that's where the bad guys come in and basically take your system down and say, we will return it to you for a certain dollar amount. And this is one that we're dealing with every day on every business size. So individuals are now being having their systems held for ransom, and they may not hold you up for big dollar amounts. They may hold you up for $600 or $1,000 or $5,000, but it's still a big expense. And these guys do it across thousands and thousands of businesses. So when they collect $500 here and $1,000 here, the numbers become very financially rewarding for them. So even in a small ransomware event, that technically is a data breach. Your data has been compromised. You don't know if you're going to get it back. So you typically got to pay an IT group to come in and figure out what happened. If the ransom is paid, the insurance company will pay for that. And then if your systems don't come back up, you've got lost time, you've got legal expenses. And in this case, this was a pretty good sized commercial real estate office that they basically were unable to conduct business for, I think it was 6 days. And so that's the business interruption expense that the insurance policy comes in and covers, because they were unable to transact business. The other issue with these ransomware attacks is because they're relatively small, there's really no place you can turn for help if you don't have either cyber insurance or somebody else insuring your business for here, because you can't call your local police department. You definitely can't call the FBI and say, someone just held me ransom for $1,000. They're getting thousands of those phone calls a day, and depending upon where the event can be traced back to. Right now, most of the FBI offices don't even touch anything under $150,000 in terms of the ransom. So they basically send you to a website, tell you to type in some information, and it goes into a big database. But they're not gonna be able to help you there. And then the biggest one, again, lost laptops, cell phone, flash drives, fill in the blank. So just keep that stuff protected. I know it's impossible to prevent total loss and theft, but if you're using remote laptops and cell phone with your business data on it, I'd encourage you to make sure that you, one, encrypt them, and two, you can have software installed where you can remotely wipe them if they are stolen or lost, so you can protect the data. So going back again to those simple steps, most everything we can trace back to on a lot of these is just simple password stuff. Almost everybody uses the same password across multiple systems. I would encourage you to get a password keeper and have a different password for every application that you use, whether it's email or your online banking or different websites. Have a different password for each one of those in case one of them is compromised, especially when your information gets stolen in these big breaches like Equifax or Uber and others. They're stealing passwords along with that information. So what they're hoping is that the password you use for your Uber account is the same password that you use for your banking or that you use for your email system. And That's why it's important to one, change them often, and two, use different ones for different applications. There's also been a pretty significant change in the logic behind what the security experts are saying to use for your passwords. The old school was to take a word that was relatively complicated. In this case, I use the example troubadour, and then take that word and change it up a little bit by taking some of the letters and making them numbers, or adding an exclamation point or a question mark at the end. That typically worked great for 60 days or 90 days, but then when you try to change it again and change it again and change it again, you start to just make simple changes to it, and it actually becomes very easy to crack. There's actually software that you can buy on the open internet, not even on the dark net. That's a software cracker, and basically with the current crackers that are out there, using this troubadour as a password, it would take less than 3 days to crack. And over time, it becomes very hard for you to remember it, because you can't remember, was the E a 4, or was there a question mark at the end? So the new school of thought is to come up with a phrase that has multiple words in it. In this case, correct torch battery staple. It's actually very, very hard to guess. It's usually pretty easy to remember. Once you type that 4 or 5 times, you'll remember it. And using the current software, it would take over 550 years to try to crack that password, and that's at 1,000 attempts per second. So just in closing, again, I'm a big proponent of trying to make sure your Wi-Fi networks are secure. I would never use public Wi-Fi. It's one of the favorite areas for the scammers and bad guys to hang out in the coffee shops, and they have software on their computers that can monitor all the Wi-Fi activity. If you don't use what's called a virtual private network service, or VPN, I'd highly encourage you to do that. They're very, very inexpensive. It costs about $25 a year to have a VPN software installed on your laptop and cell phones. I use one called VPN Unlimited. I have no affiliation with them or financial reward for recommending them, but I find them very easy to use. But you can go into the App Store or Google Play and just type in VPN, and they're very easy to purchase. Simple stuff. Don't open the suspicious emails, and again, train your employees to not open documents. They've gotten to be very, very real looking these days. I mean, the invoices, the PDF documents, but if it's not from someone they know and they're not expecting it, either don't open it or call that person and say, hey, did you just send me an invoice? What is it for? Because once you open up that document, it typically contains malware that will infect your systems, and it's very hard to get that stuff back. If you're dealing in a financial transaction mode of your deals, please use some type of encrypted email. Just assume if you're sending an email in the public space, if you're sending it from your Outlook email or you're sending it from your Gmail account, just assume as if it's in the public domain. It's no different than speaking in an open place, because those are very easy for people to now monitor and crack, especially if they can get access through your password. Lastly, encrypt those remote devices, and if you're running your own servers in your own office, make sure you're backing up that data on a daily basis and back it up somewhere off-site, either to the cloud or through a vendor. That's the easiest way to recover from a ransomware attack, is to basically don't pay the ransom, take your systems down, reinstall everything from your backup. Unfortunately, I'm being told by some of the IT consultants that there's now a way, though, that they are embedding the encrypted malware in your backup copies that's undiscoverable. So you basically take your system down, reinstall it from a backup. The code has actually been, uploaded into your backup. So you basically reinstall the malicious code. So even that is not a foolproof way to protect yourself. So, and then it's just a simple phrase for me is just treat your data and your customer data and your own data just like it's money. Keep it in a safe place. Don't throw it around. Don't give it to people you don't trust. Don't let people borrow it, and for sure don't lose it or let people steal it. And once everybody subscribes to that school of thought, then obviously you've got to make sure anybody you work with and your employees do that as well. So I'm starting to see a few questions come in here, so I'll see if I can answer those. And The first question was, how much was the risk assessment? Through the association website, you get a $200 discount. It's normally a $695 risk assessment, and you get it for $495, and you can buy it right there on the website. This is a question that said, if someone takes over your computer to fix a frozen computer, can they take all of your information? The answer to that is yes, and that's probably one of the most prevalent scams that are out there right now. Is when you call a company or you get a message that says, we've discovered you have a virus, call us or click here and we'll help you fix it for $29.99 or whatever. It may seem like that's a quick fix and an inexpensive way to do it, but what you're doing them is you're giving them an open access to your computer to, quote, fix that problem. And there's a lot of them that are legitimately, quote, fixing the problem. They take your $29, but they're also taking data that they've swept off of your laptop or off of your server. As a result of that, I would only deal with very reputable companies, people that you know and trust. Never click on the one that just comes in where they say they discovered something on your computer. Speak to either other people that you've worked with or people you know, or use a local IT company to fix your computers. They can still do the same thing. They can come in and do a remote access. You have to give them the access code, or they'll send you a link and a password, and then they'll take over your computer. And it's still a very logical way to fix your computer versus the old days of packing it up and taking it to the IT store. So it's just a matter of making sure you know who you're dealing with, because they can, once they get in, it's just like they're sitting with your computer and can take anything that's on it. This next question, I'm not sure I'm going to be able to answer, but I'll put it out there and take an attempt. It says, how does a broker evaluate the data security from providers such as Dotloop and other cloud storage providers? Most anyone in the IT space now has a data security document that they would normally provide. Depending upon the size of the company, they're required to do it under federal law, that they have to disclose the steps that they're taking. What I've seen, however, though, is one of two things. Either the evaluation document is so extensive and written in such IT code and language that it's probably not going to do much for you in terms of your evaluation, other than to look at it and go, gee, it looks like they're doing a lot of stuff, it must be secure. Or they go the opposite way, which is they say, due to security protocols, they don't want to put too much information out there because it potentially could be open up to hackers to know what they're doing to try to protect their systems. So I can't recommend one system over another. I can tell you that all of them say that they're secure, and I would tell you that all of them somewhere have some potential for a breach or a cyber event. It's just, again, looking at the big guys can't prevent it and the small ones can't. That being said, again, I encourage everyone to take some steps. I wouldn't just throw your hands up and say it's a losing battle. Having the insurance and doing the assessment and using reputable vendors is a great first step in mitigating the risk. But doing nothing isn't the right answer either. Next question is, can your computer be hacked when it is turned off? That is a good question, and I don't believe it can. I'm not an IT specialist, and a lot of these things are kind of outside my pay grade. But my understanding is, especially if your computer is even on, but it's not connected to a network, or it is not connected to a Wi-Fi network, then it is, it's impossible for, quote, the bad guys or someone from an external way to get access to your computer. It doesn't prevent someone from actually accessing the information from your computer, physically, by being, on your computer or taking paper files, things of that nature. But the remote hack would have to have a computer that is on, and it would have to be connected somewhere to the internet. And I'm going to say the same thing for this next question about, which is, I delete an email, does it then make the information unavailable if the system is later hacked? It depends on your email system and how you're indexing and storing that data. Most corporate email systems, even when you delete it off of your email, it is being maintained on the master server somewhere. Even deleted files, and those then are ultimately stored off-site. That's done primarily to protect the business itself from in litigation matters, that they can come back and recreate email chains, from years ago based off of when the lawsuit is filed. So I would have that person ask, their own internal, if you're a self-employed or small business owner, if you're running your own email servers, you could probably set it to automatically delete that. But again, there's pros and cons to that, because you may need to get that email back, maybe for professional liability or E&O claim, because once it's gone if you totally trash it. So typically what happens is I would save it as a deleted email, but drop it to a physical, hard drive and remove it from your systems. And then you keep those hard drives in a safe place, either in a fire locker or off-site storage. Next question was, what was the name of the VPN software that I suggested? And it was, it's a company called VPN Unlimited. And they come up number 1 or number 2 on the Apple iTunes store, and I know they're on the Google system as well. And I can't answer the next one. It's asking for a recommendation for encryption software for emails. There's a number of them out there, and I have not done any analysis or looked at it from a risk perspective. But I would say, any of the top 3 or 4 would be great. Again, it's better than not encrypting them.
And then Scott, thank you so much. Can you share your email one more time with everybody?
Sure, it's Scott with 2 T's, SCOTT_Reid, and that's REID at A as in Apple, JG as in go.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much. This webinar was recorded, and we will have it up on our website. Of course, cyber insurance is one of the member benefits that we now have on board. You can find it on our member benefits webpage with the direct link to their information and how to get signed up. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us and or Scott, and we thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you, everybody.